Hello there everybody, my name is Joy of Crime Art, and the word cringe is thrown around a lot these days, to the point that some may argue the word has started to lose all meaning. Oh, you like some show or video game that I don't like? That's so cringe, lol. No, dang it! You all don't know the first thing about cringe! You've merely adopted the cringe! I was born in it! Molded by it! But for real, cringe comedy is a style of humor that I've always had a real affinity for. I think it's because there's just something so relatable about it. I'm sure all of us have gone through some kind of awkward or uncomfortable situation in our lives that's kept us up at night. And these situations, while terrible in the moment, can be pretty humorous when looked back upon in hindsight, or when seen from an outsider's perspective. Cringe comedy works because it forces the audience to laugh at themselves just as much as it makes them laugh at the characters on screen. Now, there are lots of movies and shows out there that use cringe comedy to great effect, but I believe there's no series that utilizes this style of comedy better than Watamote. Watamote, or known by its English title, No Matter How I Look at It, It's You Guys' Fault I'm Not Popular, is a Japanese anime and manga series created by an author and artist duo who both go by the shared pen name of Nico Tanagawa. Released in 2011, getting a 12-episode anime adaptation in 2013, the series follows the life of Tomoko Kuroki, a 15-year-old Japanese high school first year in her quest to become the most popular girl in school and to get a boyfriend. This proves difficult for Tomoko, however, due to her suffering from both a severe case of social anxiety and an even more severe lack of common sense. Each episode features Tomoko trying a new crazy scheme in an attempt to become popular, which usually ends up backfiring and blowing up in her face. Sounds like a fairly simple, if not even somewhat bland premise. Nothing too special, but it's the way the story is told that makes it work so well, turning what would be a fairly average run-of-the-mill cringe comedy into a series that has had more of a personal impact on me as a person than almost any other singular piece of media out there. I'm not kidding. But why is that? What makes this series so special? Well, that's what I'm here to talk about today. So let's dive in as I talk about how Watamote changed my life. Boom! Look at that clickbait title! Also, light spoilers ahead. Now, the best place to start when talking about the series is with its main character, Tomoko Kuroki. Tomoko is a lazy, perverted, self-absorbed high school first year who, after being unpopular in middle school, decided to try to reinvent herself and fulfill her dream of becoming the most popular girl of school and get a boyfriend to boot. However, there are three big obstacles standing in Tomoko's way. The first and most apparent obstacle is the fact that Tomoko suffers from social anxiety disorder, being completely unable to communicate with anyone outside of a few close acquaintances, which makes Tomoko's goal of becoming the most popular girl in school difficult to say the least. Social anxiety is not a topic that you typically see covered much in media. In fact, the way that Watamote tackles the topic of social anxiety actually got the series into some hot water upon its initial release. This due to critics saying that the show didn't tackle the topic with much grace, as a lot of the jokes in the series basically center around laughing at how miserable Tomoko's life is as a result of her mental illness. Many argue that the show was taking the subject too lightly, or was just straight up offensive to those who had social anxiety disorder. However, I for one completely disagree with these claims, and honestly I have no idea where these people were getting this idea from.
Die!
You're right, I'll kill myself.
Okay, in all seriousness, I do get where the critics were coming from. Honestly, now that I think about it, I feel like this show probably wouldn't have been able to be made in the United States due to the way it tackles the issue. So the question becomes, is Watamote offensive to people with social anxiety? Well, while it may appear that way on the surface, I don't really think that it is, because while the show does use Tomoko's social anxiety as a source of comedy a lot of the time, the series doesn't shy away from the more serious aspects of the condition either. I mean, Tomoko's whole arc over the course of the series is her learning how to conquer her condition. In fact, I would go so far as to say that Watamote is one of the most realistic depictions of social anxiety I've ever seen in any piece of media. Whenever you see social anxiety depicted in media, I've noticed a trend where it seems like it almost gets glamorized in a way, treated as a sort of quirky and relatable type of thing. In contrast, however, Watamote shows firsthand just how hard living with this kind of condition can really be, showing how the long-term effects of prolonged loneliness can do a number on one's self-esteem and basic ability to function in the world around them. Does this series make jokes about it? Yes, but the series is supposed to be a comedy after all. A very, very dark comedy, but a comedy nonetheless. And reading up a bit about the creators, it seems like social anxiety is an issue that they both have suffered from themselves. So no, I don't think that the series is offensive. If anything, I think a lot of people who have social anxiety would find themselves relating to the series quite a bit, even if they wouldn't want to admit it. The second obstacle stopping Tomoko from becoming popular is her severe lack of common sense. Tomoko's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, to put it lightly, with each episode revolving around her coming up with some kind of zany scheme in order to become popular, which almost always ends up backfiring on her and results in her being humiliated in one way or another. This is where Watamote subverts your typical 3-act story structure. You see, in most stories you have a character with some kind of goal. The character then comes up with some kind of harebrained scheme that seems just crazy enough to work in order to reach this goal, and the tension in the story comes from whether or not said harebrained scheme will work or not. Watamote, however, subverts this formula, as not only does Tomoko's schemes to become popular never work, but her schemes are so disconnected from anything even resembling reality that there's no way they could ever work. An example of this is in episode 6, when Tomoko tries to become more attractive not by taking better care of herself or maybe trying on some makeup or something, but by playing porny dating sim games, because she believes that by constantly playing porny dating sim games, it will cause her body to release more estrogen, which in turn will make her more attractive somehow. That's not even her dumbest idea. This is a level of 5D GigaChad brain we're dealing with here, folks. The plan doesn't work, obviously, and you as the audience know from the start that the plan isn't going to work. So you just have to sit there and watch for 10 minutes waiting for Tomoko to figure that out for herself. This causes episodes to feel less like you're watching a conventional story and more like you're watching a slow-motion car crash you just can't turn away from, which makes the series feel all the more uncomfortable, which adds to the comedy. And the final obstacle that stops Tomoko from becoming popular is, honestly, Tomoko herself. Tomoko isn't exactly the nicest person. She's lazy, selfish, bitter at the world around her, and generally assumes the worst in others. She's a character defined by her own contradictions. She wants to become the most popular girl in school, but also thinks other popular kids are shallow. She's a massive pervert who aspires to get a boyfriend, but she also views anyone in romantic relationships as sluts. She's a nerd who's into things like anime and video games, but looks down at others who have the same interest. Tomoko is a massive hypocrite and can come off as pretty unlikable at times. However, despite all this, I do think the show managed to keep Tomoko from ever becoming too unlikable for the most part. Because for as awful as she can be, it all comes from a place of self-loathing. Tomoko projects her insecurity onto others, which is why she comes off as such a hypocrite. She hates others because they remind her of the things she hates about herself. She's just often stuck inside her own head. It's not that she's a bad person, it's just that she literally doesn't know how to be friendly to people because she never had the opportunity to learn. However, I think this too works in the series' favor. Tomoko's constant suffering would probably come across as too mean-spirited if she wasn't so awful. The series is able to stay funny because as much as pain Tomoko goes through, on some level she kinda deserves it. That said though, I will say that if you don't like Tomoko as a character, then the series probably isn't going to be for you. Unsurprisingly, the series revolving around a girl unable to talk to people doesn't have that many other characters, with about 80% of the series' dialogue just being Tomoko's inner monologue as she reacts to the world around her. However, that doesn't mean there aren't any other side characters. The most major example of a side character in the series would probably be Tomoko's younger brother Tomoki, who Tomoko convinces to have daily talks with her in order to help her build back her confidence. He's stoic and aloof, often getting annoyed by his sister's dumb antics. He plays a good foil to Tomoko and acts well as a series' straight man. We also have Yu Naruse, or Yu-chan, Tomoko's ditzy and sociable friend from middle school who now attends a different high school. Like Tomoko, Yu-chan was also unpopular in middle school, but unlike Tomoko, was actually able to reinvent herself upon entering high school by dyeing her hair and hiding her more nerdy side. Interesting fact, Yu-chan was actually a result of executive meddling, as the editor behind the series requested that Tanagawa give Tomoko at least one friend in order to stop the series from becoming too depressing. However, unlike other characters who were introduced because of executive say, it never feels that the creators are resentful for her inclusion. She's a good character, and an example of one of the times that executive meddling can actually work in a series' favor. She has a good contrast to Tomoko, representing everything that Tomoko wants to be. There's also Tomoko's younger cousin, Kiko Sadozaki, aka Ki-chan, who used to idolize Tomoko when she was younger, only to have her perception of Tomoko be completely shattered upon learning about the type of person that Tomoko really is. And finally, there's Megami Ime, a kind-hearted student 1 year above Tomoko, seems to be the only person in Tomoko's school who actually notices Tomoko throughout the series, helping her out in moments of distress. While not a major character, only appearing in the last couple of episodes, she plays a big part of Tomoko's development, being one of the only other students during Tomoko's first year to show her any amount of kindness. But yet, beyond that, the cast is relatively small, which I think is a good thing. It keeps the focus on Tomoko and her feeling of isolation. Everyone else is a background character, half of the time not even being drawn with faces. further cementing just how distant Tomoko feels from the rest of her peers. A decision that was definitely symbolic, and not just wait for the animators to cheap out the animation, totally not at all. The show's humor, as I said earlier, isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea. Most of the humor relies heavily on cringe comedy, so your tolerance for the show is going to depend on your tolerance for pain. But my god, does this show know how to master cringe comedy to a T. It's so easy to put yourself in Tomoko's shoes, and every situation Tomoko gets herself in is genuinely uncomfortable to watch. I mean that in the best of ways. Whenever the humor isn't revolving around Tomoko's suffering, it usually involves Tomoko being a pervert. Especially around female characters, because despite Tomoko being hard set on her goal of getting a boyfriend, it's made pretty clear early on that Tomoko is some sort of bi or pansexual.
No, I'm not a pervert! I was just wondering what kind of panties a girl with a boyfriend wears, I swear!
A fact that she herself seems to be somewhat in denial about. Not because of any internalized homophobia, or at least not primarily because of that reason. Rather, she seems just genuinely unaware that things like trying to fondle your female friend's butt isn't things normal heterosexual girls are supposed to do. Further showing just how unaware Tomoko really is when it comes to romantic relationships. And speaking of fondle, I hope you think that molestation is funny, because a lot of the jokes revolve around Tomoko doing perverted things to people that definitely would be seen in a different light if this series had been written in not Japan. From trying to fondle her friends to straight up trying to hit on her own younger brother, the series has no qualms showing just how much of a degenerate Tomoko really is. Now, I've seen enough anime and manga over the years, and I'm pretty used to this type of humor at this point. You can sort of just turn my brain off and ignore it. But if that's the type of thing that bothers you, then yeah, you probably just shouldn't watch this show. It's not going to be for you. While the type of jokes can vary, the core of Watamote's humor relies on the discomfort of the viewer. But while it may sound like that would get repetitive, I'm actually kind of surprised how well the series manages to keep it fresh, for the most part. Your tolerance for cringe will determine if you're going to like this show or not. It's a very niche style of humor to be sure, but it's a style of humor that I've really come to appreciate. In terms of overall production value, the series is fine. It works well enough for what it's trying to do, though I'd be lying if I said there weren't some parts of the show that look a bit dated. Like, it doesn't look bad, but you can tell this show came out in the early 2010s. The show tends to reuse a lot of the same music cues over and over again, which I know is common in a lot of anime, but I don't know, I feel like it was very noticeable here. To be fair, the character animation can be pretty expressive, especially on Tomoko herself, but I think you can tell that they were working within a budget. Surprisingly, the one aspect of the series that seems to be universally loved is one of the aspects that I'm actually not too crazy about, and that would be the show's theme song. People online seem to love this jam, while I personally just think it's just okay. I think it sounds good, and I like the symbolism of Tomoko being tied up by all these chains only to break free and smack herself right into the camera. It's a good microcosm of Tomoko's journey throughout the whole show. It's just, well, I've never been able to take anime death metal theme songs seriously, I'm sorry. I know that's like the joke, it's a slice of life comedy that puts you off guard by having this super edgy death metal opening, but I don't know, it's just cringe. I know the whole show is cringe, but just like a different type of cringe. I much prefer the show's ending theme, being a more of a cutesy typical J-pop song sung by Tomoko's Japanese voice actress Izumi Kita, making it sound like a song that Tomoko is singing at like a karaoke bar or something. I especially like how there are these parts where the singer intentionally messes up, coughing or singing off key, just like how I imagine Tomoko would sing it. And the extended version is something else. I never knew that hearing Tomoko fast rap was something I needed in my life, but here we are. And speaking of which, let's talk about voice acting. Which should you go for, sub or dub? Well, obviously everyone's gonna have their own preferences with this kind of thing. As previously stated, the original Japanese version, Tomoko was voiced by Izumi Kita, who honestly does a really good job voicing the character, with her meek and high-pitched voice really selling the more emotional moments of the series. Like, you buy that this girl has social anxiety.
ご注文どうぞ。ハンバーガーで単品でよろしいですか？はい。水とかってはい。
Meanwhile, the English version of Tomoko is played by Monica Rial, who luckily is also a pretty good choice. Monica Rial definitely goes for a different take on Tomoko, giving her this raspy and nasally voice, playing more into the comedic and demented side of Tomoko's character.
Hey, where's the instant ramen that was in my room?
Obviously I ate it! I'll kill you!
Also, every time Tomoko talks, I just hear Sue from My Hero. I like that. I appreciate how both actors have different takes on the characters, as it gives reason for one to check out both versions. I think I prefer Azumi Kita's performance a bit more, however, but I also acknowledge that might be because that's the version I saw first, though I will usually rewatch the English version for the sake of convenience. However, not doing the English version any favors is the fact that the dub was done by Sentai Filmworks, who, to be completely honest, isn't my favorite dubbing company. Not saying that the company hasn't done good work, it's just that a lot of the dubs feel a bit cheap to me, especially with lower profile titles like this. Like, Tomoko and Tomoki are cast well, and granted most of the dialogue comes from them, but I don't know, I feel like a lot of the side and background characters just sound a bit off to me. But I don't know, that might just be a me thing. Over the course of Watamote's 12-episode run, we see Tomoko develop and change. It's a very minute change, but it's still a noticeable one, with her goals slowly going from becoming the most popular girl in school and getting a boyfriend at the start of the series to just wanting a friend by the end of it. The series shows how hard the struggle of social anxiety can be for a person, especially during such a critical time in your life such as adolescence. But the series also shows that you can overcome these challenges, one step at a time. By the series' end, Tomoko does become better at talking to people, if only just slightly. She still clearly has a long way to go, but it shows that one does not need to be defined by their mental illness, that no matter how hard your struggles are, you can overcome it. As said earlier, Tomoko is a character defined by her contradictions, and for as much of a cynic as Tomoko can be, when you look at her actions, Tomoko's actually extremely optimistic. Tomoko never gives up or believes that popularity is something outside her grasp. Despite how many times her harebrained schemes blow up in her face, she never stops trying. She always picks herself up, rethinks her approach, and tries again. That's why Tomoko is such an easy character to root for, despite her shortcomings. You want Tomoko to succeed. And while she fails 99% of the time, it makes the small victories she does have all the more satisfying. The series reminds me a lot of Peanuts in a way. Just hear me out. In Peanuts, Charlie Brown always has a goal, whether it be to get with a little redhead girl, or win a baseball game, or kick a football. You know going in that he's going to fail. Even he knows that he's going to fail. But he tries anyway, and you root for him regardless. Also, Tomoko and Charlie Brown are both mentally ill incels, so make of that what you will. Also, despite everything that Tomoko goes through, the series never feels too mean because it's almost always self-inflicted. Tomoko isn't bullied by her classmates or anything, in fact they don't even seem to know she exists. The ultimate irony is that if Tomoko were to just give up on the crazy schemes, stop trying so hard to impress other people and just be herself, she probably wouldn't have a problem making friends in the first place. Since the manga was still ongoing, Watamote had an anime original ending, in which Tomoko, after suffering one too many embarrassing episodes, decided to stop caring about not having any friends and learns to just accept herself for who she is. The reception to this ending seemed to be mostly negative, and I do see where a lot of people were coming from. For one, it's very rushed, only taking up about the final minute of the last episode. And while self-love is important, so is having human connections. I believe that both are important in having a well-balanced life. Though seeing Tomoko just abandon any attempt to make said connections did feel a bit anticlimactic. But I don't want to be too hard on the ending, as I'm sure it was difficult for the people behind the anime to think of an ending that would still feel somewhat satisfying when they didn't have an ending to go off of. Look, I'm just saying in terms of anime original endings, we could have had a heck of a lot worse.
Why does the end of summer make me feel so sad? Because I'm nervous about the new school semester? Or is it because I'm sitting here alone eating instant ramen? I read in some book that pain and sadness are the spice of life that makes it enjoyable. But all I get is spice. I can't make anything with just this. I thought all kinds of fun things would happen to me once I entered high school. No, I have to keep looking up. I have to focus on the present. A new semester. A new chapter. Everything up till now is just a warm-up. The real show starts now. Piece of cake.
Watamote ran for one 12-episode season, plus a 22-minute bonus OVA being released 1 year later in 2014, which still doesn't have an official US release, I'd like to add. But after that, the series quietly ended. From what I can gather, despite the anime having a somewhat definitive ending, there did seem to be some interest from the creators in creating a second season. But sadly, it was not meant to be. While the series did gain a bit of a cult audience in America, the anime bombed hard in Japan. Plus, keep in mind, Watamote came out in the early 2010s. Around this time, it was pretty common for animes, even popular ones, to only get 12 or 13 episodes. hook people in with the anime, and then force them to buy the manga if they want to see the actual ending. For most people, this is where the series ended and people moved on with their lives. However, despite this, while I noticed that Watamote definitely faded into obscurity, it never really went away completely. Even nowadays, I still see people with Watamote profile pictures on Twitter and see some videos talking about the series on YouTube, which is a bit surprising when you consider that the anime ended nearly 10 years ago. I feel like if you showed your average anime fan a picture of Tomoko, they would probably recognize her, even if they didn't know exactly what show she was from. It's ironic that despite Watamote being about a girl who spends her whole life being unnoticed, she's actually somewhat popular, becoming this sort of symbol of socially awkward degenerate weebs everywhere. It's funny, in the years since Watamote's race, I feel like there's been an influx of series that tackle social anxiety as a theme, several of which have gone on to be highly successful. Maybe Watamote was just ahead of its time. It would have been more popular if it had come out, say, a decade later. But what if I told you that was only half the story? Because while the Watamote anime may have come and gone, the Watamote manga has been ongoing, carrying on from where the anime left off. After watching the anime and being somewhat let down by the ending, I wanted to see how the series really ended. So back around 2017 or so, I decided to check out the manga, and I have to say...
Show me your dick.
Fuck off.
It's pretty great. Not only is it great, but it goes in a direction that I never in a million years would have guessed the series would have gone based solely on what happened in the anime. Like, I don't want to be one of those people who say, oh, the anime is just the prologue to the manga or anything. The anime only adapts the first 3.5 volumes of the Watamote manga, which at the time of writing this video currently has over 22 volumes. That's only like 16% of the story. Meaning that most of the people who only watched the Watamote anime back in 2013 don't have the full picture of what the series is really all about. So let's dive in and talk about the Watamote manga. So starting from where the anime left off, the Watamote manga at first feels like more of the same. It isn't until Tomoko enters her second year of high school where the series status quo begins to change. For one, we actually get to see Tomoki go to the same high school as Tomoko, resulting in more opportunities for stories where they're forced to interact with each other. However, the much bigger change is actually with Tomoko herself. So remember how the anime ended with Tomoko deciding to just give up on her crazy schemes to become popular, and how many people felt like it was just a last-minute ploy by the anime staff to give the series some kind of finality? Well, to my surprise, what happens in the manga isn't actually all that different from that. Now, it does differ a little. It isn't that Tomoko learns to accept herself as a loner like in the anime, it's rather that just after a whole year of constant humiliation, she finally becomes self-aware enough to realize that her plans never work. And upon entering her second year, she decides to stop trying so hard. Instead of focusing on becoming the most popular girl in school, she just wants to focus on having a normal high school life. Now, she still tries to make friends and still does the occasional wacky scheme every once in a while, but it becomes a lot more infrequent. I actually like this change in direction. The series could have so easily just kept focusing on Tomoko trying to become popular for its entire run, and heck, if it did, I'm sure the series still would have been good. But I think Nico Tanagawa realized that sticking to that formula would have caused the series to become repetitive after a while. Plus, having Tomoko become more self-aware of herself does a good job in showing that she's capable of learning from her past mistakes. Not only that, but for the first time in the series, we get an actual adult character who notices Tomoko's social anxiety, and actually tries to help her in the form of her second-year homeroom/phys ed teacher, Anjino-sensei. Fair warning for characters who are introduced in the manga, I expect me to more than likely butcher their names. I love Anjino-sensei. She is best mom and definitely means Wii Fit Trainer in Smash Ultimate. She actively goes out of her way to help Tomoko and push her towards making some friends. Which sounds like a good thing, but of course, because this is Watamote, she's really bad at it. Yeah, Anjino doesn't really get the whole social anxiety thing, lacking any kind of tact or social grace, resulting in her coming off as more of a burden to Tomoko than anything else. But as blunt as she may be, you can't argue with her results, and she does push Tomoko outside of her comfort zone. And you know how I said that if Tomoko actually stopped it with all of her crazy schemes and just tried being herself, she would actually have a better shot of making some friends? Well, that's exactly what ends up happening. And not only does she end up making friends, she actually becomes popular. You know, this girl.
Show me your dick.
Fuck off.
Yeah, remember all that stuff I said praising the anime for keeping its cast small, as it allowed the series to keep us within Tomoko's perspective? Yeah, we'll take everything I said about that and just toss it in the trash. Not only does the Watamote manga add new characters to the series, but it adds a lot. It's actually surprised me when I read the series for the first time. Like, I knew the series was probably going to have Tomoko overcome her anxiety and start making connections with people eventually, but I would assume that would be like near the end of the series. But it happens more around the middle. But yet again, I think this was a good direction for the series to take. So let's go through the members of Tomoko's main friend circle one by one, shall we? The first friend Tomoko meets in her second year is Hida Nomoto. Nemo is your typical bubbly valley girl from the popular clique, with her extroverted nature making it easy for Tomoko to get to know her since Nemo's really the one doing all the heavy lifting. However, at this point the two aren't really friends as much as just friendly acquaintances. It's not until later on in the story when Tomoko accidentally finds out that Nemo was actually a closet anime fan with dreams of becoming a voice actress that the two actually are able to form a more genuine bond. As Tomoko stops feeling the need to raise herself up to Nemo's quote-unquote level, and Nemo is able to find someone who she doesn't have to put up an act around, allowing her to show Tomoko her real self. Only for it then to be revealed that Nemo's real self is honestly kind of a jerk. Yet it becomes quickly apparent that Nemo isn't really the ditzy and kind person she initially presents herself as being. With her having her own share of vices, with her being super competitive and passive-aggressive, this results in Tomoko and Nemo's relationship feeling very tsundere, with them constantly trying to one-up each other. However, I don't feel like this is necessarily a bad thing. I think giving Nemo this more mean-spirited side to her helps the character feel more three-dimensional, and it also helps differentiate her from Yu-chan, who is also a closet anime nerd who hides behind a ditzy popular facade. And it is made abundantly clear that for all of her prodding, Nemo still does look up to Tomoko and her ability to be true to herself regardless of how dumb it makes her look, which pushes Nemo to be more true to herself as a result, even if she would be ashamed to admit it. Not long after that, we were introduced to Otome Komiyama, first introduced in the Watamote spin-off prequel manga, which also hasn't got an official US release, I like to add. Komiyama is an old friend of Yu-chan who Tomoko knew in middle school, but completely forgot about upon entering high school. She acts like a pseudo-rival/parallel Tomoko, as she too is a quiet, nerdy pervert who doesn't have many friends, which shows why Tomoko doesn't like her. Again, it goes back to that whole projecting her insecurity thing that I mentioned earlier. She reminds Tomoko too much of herself. The main difference, however, at least early on, is that she seems to be smarter and more subdued compared to Tomoko. However, despite this, the two are still forced to interact with them both sharing a mutual friend in Yu-chan and Komiyama having a crush on Tomoko's younger brother Tomoki, two factors that definitely help contribute to why Tomoko doesn't like her. I think this would lead to the traditional thing where the two don't like each other but eventually end up becoming friends over time, you know, that sort of thing, but surprisingly that doesn't happen, which part of me feels like is a bit of a wasted opportunity keeping the relationship so static, though I also admit it's kind of neat seeing the relationship take a more realistic approach. Sometimes in life you're going to have to interact with people that you don't like. However, she and Tomoko will cooperate with each other occasionally, even if it's usually just for Yu-chan's benefit. Also, she likes baseball. Did I mention that she likes baseball? Because she likes baseball, specifically the Chiba Lottie Marines. I sort of get the feeling that Nico Tenagawa might be a fan of them. I mean, I'm just guessing based on the fact that every single character in the series is named after a member of the team, but yeah, that's just a hunch. Things wouldn't begin to seriously change for Tomoko, however, until they got to the Kyoto arc, where Tomoko would end up becoming group leader at the behest of Anjino during their second-year class trip to Kyoto. And this is where we'd be introduced to three new characters who would become staples from the series going forward. First, we have Yuri Tamura, a quiet, gloomy girl with dark hair and purple eyes, characterized by her lack of social grace and clingy nature and... Dang it. In her earlier appearances, Yuri was characterized as being a fairly normal girl, albeit one that's not very adept at talking to others, whose main role was to act as a straight man to Tomoko's weird antics. However, after a couple of volumes, her personality started to change a bit, with her being characterized as a lot more stoic and more socially challenged. Even more socially challenged than Tomoko even. I know there are some Watamote fans out there who weren't a big fan of how drastic a shift Yuri had undergone, with people arguing that it felt like the writers didn't really know what to do with Yuri, so they just kind of rewrote her personality partway through. I admit I wasn't crazy about the sudden shift at first either, but after getting more used to it, I actually prefer Yuri's later characterization more. While Tomoko's social anxiety was usually played for laughs, Yuri's was played less comedically, due to Yuri being a much less exaggerated character than Tomoko. She's clingy, aggressive, and has trouble relating to others, and while these traits may come off as somewhat unlikable at times, they feel like the type of negative qualities someone like this would have. She's a lot like early Tomoko, however a more deadpan personality and stoic demeanor manages to make her not feel too similar. Plus, by the time she's introduced, Tomoko had already become a bit less socially anxious, so adding her to the cast allowed the series to continue tackling issues of social anxiety without having to compromise Tomoko's character development. The dynamic with Tomoko is super endearing, as Tomoko is the one who has to push Yuri to be less antisocial, showing just how far Tomoko has grown since the series started, and resulting in a lot of great character growth between both characters. The two grow a really strong bond as the story progresses, and it's really nice seeing these two loners finally find someone who they can really relate to. Next we have Masaki Yoshida, a violent punker who Tomoko seems to believe is beneath her due to her being a quote-unquote delinquent. While many of the previous characters in the series would be annoyed with Tomoko's antics and occasionally lash out against her, Yoshida is just having none of it, and is fully willing to beat the crap out of Tomoko when the need arises. The need arises a lot. However, she too would soften up as time goes on and end up becoming close friends with Tomoko and Yuri. Despite her outwardly tough exterior, she's actually shown to be one of the more caring and well-rounded characters in the whole series. It actually seems to be a lot more innocent than a lot of the rest of the cast. I know the tough girl who actually has a pure heart and innocent side to them is kind of a cliche at this point, but it's cute, okay? What do you want from me? I also like how Yoshida isn't as insecure and clingy as a lot of other characters are. He's generally more confident in who she is, not caring how others see her, which is kind of refreshing when you consider how many characters in the series are so self-conscious. Despite how harsh she can be at times, it's clear that she still cares about people and is genuinely a good person at heart. And finally we have Emery Uchi, nicknamed Emoji by Tomoko due to her looking like, well, I can see the resemblance. Uchi is a fairly typical girl who starts the series wanting nothing to do with Tomoko, but after a misunderstanding she comes to the conclusion that Tomoko is a stalker who has a crush on her. And as time goes on, this turns into an obsession with Tomoko. She starts believing that every interaction she has with her, no matter how minor, is some kind of perverted ploy by Tomoko to get in her pants. As the series progresses, Uchi's obsession with Tomoko only continues to grow, with her being disgusted that a girl would have a thing for her. Because as we all know, it isn't normal for girls to date, and it's best to stick with what's normal.
Based.
But slowly over time, Uchi begins to be flattered that someone like Tomoko would have the hots for her. Even though Uchi is, ironically enough, one of the few female characters in the series that Tomoko doesn't constantly try to perv on. That's right, folks, we got ourselves a case of big, self-hating, gay energy! You love to see it! As Stockholm Syndrome begins to set in for the stalking that isn't happening, Uchi begins to fall hard for Tomoko, with her becoming more and more obsessed with her as time goes on, all while Tomoko barely registers Uchi's existence. Some may call it a gay panic. I call it being a simp. Eventually, Uchi begins to realize that stalking Tomoko isn't exactly working out for her, and realizes that if she wants to get to know Tomoko, she has to actually, get to know her. Tomoko's newfound popularity doesn't stop once the trip is over though. As her newfound social skills carry over to her daily life, she continues to make new friends, like Asuka Kato, one of the most popular and glamorous girls in school who becomes oddly fascinated with Tomoko. She's depicted as being kind and motherly for the most part, and isn't as shallow as one would expect from her typical glamour girl archetype. She's actually shown to be very intelligent, ambitious, and hardworking, which in turn causes Tomoko to put her up on a pedestal. And she becomes fast friends with Tomoko despite their different social standings. She also seems to be the only person in Tomoko's friend group that doesn't think Tomoko is a weirdo, even pushing Tomoko to go outside of her comfort zone and give her the confidence to do things she would never try otherwise, like actually working to try to get into her top choice college, Aoyama University. With Tomoko gaining so many new female friends in such a relatively short amount of time, many people online have accused the series of essentially turning into a Yuri harem series. Given how our previously established sapphic protagonist is suddenly surrounded by several girls of vastly different archetypes, often competing for her attention. However, that's really just an exaggeration. I mean, outside of Uchi, none of the girls have really shown any confirmed signs of being gay. They're just friends, doing things that normal heterosexual friends do with each other, like watching porn together in public, touching each other's breasts, and practicing not safe for work voice acting together. It's not gay, it's just really, really, really not straight. Like, I'm not trying to take sides, but I'm putting my money on the girl whose name is literally Yuri. However, that's just Tomoko's main friend group. The series also has a wide variety of other secondary characters as well, as all of Tomoko's friends all have friends of their own, who Tomoko often has to interact with, which is something I think is really neat. Whenever you see a group of friends in a piece of media, these friends always seem to just hang out with each other and nobody else. However, in real life, things aren't always so cut and dry. Just because you have one group of friends you like hanging around with doesn't mean you don't also hang out with people outside of said group. There are too many characters for me to go through all of them, but I'll try to run through the ones that are the most important / some of my personal favorites. We have Mako Tanaka, Yuri's only friend prior to meeting Tomoko and Yoshida. She's a genuinely kind and sweet girl, and one of the few genuinely normal characters in the entire series, who due to a misunderstanding is under the impression that Tomoko is this really kind and sweet girl, all Tomoko is under the impression that she's a lesbian, because that's just the type of series that this is at this point. Tomoko can't figure out that Uchi is gay, but comes to the conclusion that Mako is a lesbian based on nothing. Yeah, sure, okay. Speaking of characters who are relatively normal, we have Akane Okada, Nemo's best friend. She's a spunky and headstrong girl from the popular clique. Being relatively normy, she's clearly in the dark when it comes to hanging out with introverts and social outcasts like Tomoko, but she still tries to put in the effort regardless, even if the learning curve is a bit steep. We have Akari and Sayaka, two girls a year younger than Tomoko. Akari is a genuinely kind and innocent girl who, much like Komiyama, has a crush on Tomoko's younger brother Tomoki. This of course summons the ire of Tomoko, who believes her to be a massive pervert after, what else, a misunderstanding. However, she ends up forming a surprising bond/friendly rivalry with Komiyama despite them both pining over the same guy. Sayaka, meanwhile, is Akari's friend and the best, worst wingman anyone could ask for. There's Sasaki Fuka, a sporty girl and one of Kato's friends, who gains a weird obsession with Tomoko after being concerned about her influence on Kato. Fuka seems to be a somewhat divisive character from what I can tell, with many people finding her obsession/rivalry with Tomoko to be a bit contrived, which I can definitely see. I've seen it pointed out that a lot of her gags are kind of repeats of other characters' jokes, like her constant misinterpretation of Tomoko's actions for something sexual is pretty much the same gag as Uchi had early on in the series. And heck, in terms of Tomoko having a rival, we already had that with Komiyama. However, I will note that Fuka was introduced to the story after characters like Uchi and Komiyama had already moved on from those roles. Supporters of Fuka, however, will argue that her inclusion helps the series stay true to its cringy roots, but the series had been steadily moving away from it as it became more character-focused. Overall, I'm fine with Fuka, not one of my favorite characters or anything, but I don't hate her either. Maiho Narita, on the other hand, is best girl, and I will not tolerate any slander. She's another one of Kato's friends and is just a super laid-back, down-to-earth, fun-loving girl, just loves messing around with people. It gets along with Tomoko almost immediately. I don't know, man, she's just fun. I like her. In this house, we stand Maiho Narita. There's Koharu Minami. She's the stereotypical snobby mean girl character you see a lot of these typical high school stories. However, what makes Minami stand out compared to other characters who fall into this trope is that everyone actively hates her. Because, you know, she's awful. Like, you see this trope a lot in a lot of these underdog girl becomes popular high school stories, where we'll have these awful, self-absorbed mean girls who act as the antagonist to our hero, who despite being vapid and acting horrible to everyone around them, somehow always manages to be beloved by all their peers, for some reason. Watamote is here to point out that real life doesn't work that way, and if all you do is talk smack to people, they're not going to want to be your friend, and as such she acts as the perfect antithesis to Tomoko, whom she dislikes due to Tomoko slowly becoming more popular, while she becomes more of an outcast as people become less and less willing to put up with her, which in a form of double subversion actually ends up making her more sympathetic, causing you as the reader to end up rooting for her to improve. And we also have Shiki Futaki, also known by her nickname Emoji Mark II, who may just have the greatest character design in all of fiction. All other characters I could go home, because I can't imagine us getting anything better than this! Look at her! She looks like a jack-o'-lantern. Seriously, I haven't convinced you to read this series for yourself by this point. I just don't know what to tell you. Futaki's great. She's a gamer girl who has a dream of being a Let's Player. I know this is usually the part where I talk about how her characterization affects the story or highlights Tomoko's development in some way, but Futaki doesn't really do that. Honestly, you could probably write her out of the story without really changing much, but like, why do you want to do that? Like, look at her. We have Shizuku Hirasawa, a first-year student Tomoko meets upon entering her third year of high school. She's a parody of the standard shoujo protagonist, being popular with all the boys in her class, which in turn makes her hated by the girls. This leads to her going to Tomoko for advice on how to make friends with other girls, seeing as Tomoko has so many. Tomoko initially only decides to help her for selfish reasons, but over time Tomoko makes more of a genuine effort to help her, or at least try to be her friend, due to her having memories of the way Megami helped her back when she was a first year. It's nice seeing Tomoko in a mentor relationship with someone, showing how much she's grown over the course of the series, even if her advice isn't always the most spot on. Plus there's also Aito, Sachi, Yoshida's delinquent friends, the Emoji Gang, the dog. Honestly, I'm shocked at how massive the cast of Watamote has become. Compared to how the series started, it feels like comparing the original Super Smash Bros. To Smash Ultimate. It's insane. We also get all these fun little character dynamics between the characters that goes beyond their relationship with Tomoko. Like Nemo and Yuri have this sort of unspoken rivalry thing going on. Mako and Yoshida form this random but weirdly wholesome friendship. Futaki joins a gang. It's great. And shows that while the series may focus on Tomoko, the world doesn't necessarily revolve around her. I'm actually surprised how well the series is able to balance so many characters. Though I will admit there are some characters that you can tell the writers enjoy using more than others, and some characters who were previously important falling sort of to the wayside as time goes on.
I don't want to play with you anymore.
I can't think of another series that introduces their main cast of characters so late into the series run. It doesn't seem like something that should work, yet somehow it does. But it also saddens me a bit. All these characters I just talked about aren't in the anime. So people who have only seen the anime have no idea that any of these characters even exist, which is part of the reason why I try to spread the word about the manga whenever I can. Okay, technically a few of the characters appear in the anime as cameos, but I don't think this should really count. I mean, look at this girl. This is supposed to be Nemo. That's not Nemo. Hashtag not my Nemo. One thing about this series is that it's shockingly well thought out. Characters appear super early on in minor roles, only be brought back as major characters volumes later. Events from early on will carry over too, which helps make the world feel more grounded amidst all the over-the-top hijinks. And oh my god, can we talk about the art? Look, I thought the show's animation was fine, but the art in the manga is on a whole nother level, and it just keeps improving as time goes on. It can be so expressive at times. Let me tell you, the artist knows how to have characters channel their inner blobfish. But while some characters have these really over-the-top expressions, some others are super subtle and subdued. Like, look at how a slight twinge of the eyebrow can convey so much anger. Or characters having these little tics. Like, Nemo's always smiling, but whenever she's angry, her pupils become larger. It's subtle, keeping in line with her passive-aggressive nature. Yuri is supposed to be gloomy, so she almost never emotes at all, and is always drawn frowning. But that makes the moments where she does smile feel so much more significant. Fashion is also on point. The way these characters dress is so stylish that even I, someone who knows nothing about fashion, can't help but marvel at these designs. And the background work and lighting are incredible too. It just confirms to me that the anime deserved a Nichijou-style budget. One problem I do have though is with the layout of the comic. I'll admit that it's not the greatest. Oftentimes text balloons will cover large chunks of the art, or they'll have panels that are just nothing but text balloons, which wouldn't necessarily be a problem on its own, except oftentimes there's nothing indicating which character is supposed to be speaking which lines, but that's a small nitpick. And speaking of nitpicks, the manga does, of course, have some flaws, several of which I've already touched upon. Flanderization hits most of the cast to some degree, with Uchi and especially Komiyama being hit with it the worst. Seriously, Komiyama, what have they done to you? While characters have depth, they can feel a bit like they only have one or two jokes to them, that the series tends to repeat a lot. I notice this a lot in other anime as well, so it might just be a cultural divide, but it is noticeable. Watamote is also a very mean-spirited series. And most of the characters are kind of jerks to one another, which can at times make some of the characters feel a bit unlikable, which may turn people off as well. The series can also be very contrived at points, where characters don't act like the way normal people are supposed to act for the sake of a gag or plot point. Like, I bought it in the anime because it was Tomoko. She's dumb, it makes sense. But when it starts happening to other characters, it feels a bit forced. I know it's a common trope in anime series like this, but still, it can be a bit much at times. The further the series gets in its run, the less reliant the series feels to have as many embarrassing or uncomfortable moments. They're still there, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel like Nico Tanagawa feels the need to include them in every chapter. Some chapters don't even feel the need to focus on telling jokes at all, and instead focus on just the characters just kinda hanging out. Because the characters are strong enough where just seeing them all bounce off each other is compelling enough. Chapters having happy endings become a lot more common, however that doesn't mean the series is completely void of conflict, however. Because even if Tomoko has succeeded in her initial goal of making friends, she learns that having friends has its own set of problems as well. The series shifts from Tomoko learning how to make friends to Tomoko learning how to be a good friend. And seeing Tomoko in the later parts of the series, it's amazing how much she's changed. Tomoko in the later chapters of the manga is a lot more mature than Tomoko we see early on. She becomes more compassionate, thoughtful, and hardworking. Early on, she couldn't relate to the plights of others because she couldn't relate to others, period. Making friends got her out of her head a little bit and makes her a better person as a result. Of course, it's still Tomoko, so she's still by no means a saint. She's still selfish, perverted, and blunt. But she's improving. And that's when you realize that Watamote isn't just a story about a teenage girl overcoming her social anxiety. It's a coming-of-age story about a teenage girl learning to grow up. I know there are people out there who aren't a fan of the direction that the manga had gone in, saying that the series had gone downhill and lost what had initially made it so special, with it now being just your average generic slice-of-life high school comedy with Yuri elements that you can find almost anywhere. And the thing is, in a lot of ways, they're not wrong. I can completely understand how people who are initially fans of the series could be turned off by the direction the series has gone in, because if I'm being honest, they're a completely different beast. However, I think it worked because the change felt earned. Tomoko didn't just become popular overnight. She had to work for it. Time and time again she fell down, but kept getting back up and was rewarded for it. Is it realistic for someone like Tomoko to amass so many friends in such a relatively short period of time? No, but does it have to be? It's wish fulfillment, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Growing up, I didn't have many friends. During my teenage years, I was homeschooled and as such had very little reason to ever leave the house. I was basically a shut-in, and I had trouble talking to people outside my immediate family. And I feel like a lot of people who stumbled upon the Watamote anime back in 2013 probably had experiences similar to mine. I relate to Tomoko Kuroki more than any other character in fiction. Watamote may not be my favorite series of all time, it's up there but it's not my favorite, but Tomoko is my favorite character of all time. And watching her grow, improve as a person, and gain the companionship she always wanted and achieve her dream high school life, it struck a chord with me. I'm a lot better when it comes to talking to people now compared to how I was when I was younger. I still don't really have that many friends, but I can talk to people relatively normally now, and I no longer feel as anxious when I go out in public. I'm in a better place, and I like to think that Watamote helped me get to that place. I'm not saying that one piece of fiction was like the only thing that helped me conquer my fear of talking to people. It wasn't, obviously. But this series gave me a sense of hope. I mean, if this girl can become popular and make friends,
Show me your dick.
Fuck off.
then really, is anyone beyond hope? This series has always held a special place in my heart, and I'm grateful I was able to share it with you all. If you got this far in the video and the series seems at all interesting to you, I highly recommend you check it out. The series is available to stream on High Dive and can be purchased on Blu-ray or DVD. As for the manga, it can be purchased through Yen Press, or wherever manga is sold. Or, if you want something a little different, you can check out some of Nika Tanigawa's other mangas.
I'll never forgive the Japanese!
If you've seen the series, what do you think of Watamote? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. If you can't tell, this is clearly a series I'm very passionate about, so I would love to hear what you all think. And if you like this video, feel free to like it, subscribe, and consider checking out my Patreon if you want to see more videos like it. And as always, have a great day.
Show me your dick. Show me your dick. Show me your dick. Show me your dick.